K98 Talk is expanding its lineup for 2015. This means we are expanding our advertising base. Whether you're a startup trying to push through to the next level or an established business trying to supplement your advertising budget, web-based advertising is a solid investment. Thanks to Talk's newest partnership with TuneIn Radio and instant access to our sister station, K98 FM, we give you worldwide access at a reasonable cost. Interested parties should email us at sales@k98fm.com.
Game on, where progressives fear us and rhinos tremble. Welcome to the political jungle. I'm JD.
This is Stacy. No one is safe. No one is spared.
Lock up the children.
And the old folk.
Welcome to the world of liberservative conservatarians.
That's right, everybody. Did you miss me Sunday? Because I'm back on Tuesday. JD's back like that Wolfman Jack, baby. Nobody have no fear, because it wasn't like the goblins came and got me. The scary JD Host Ghost.
It's the host monkey.
The host monkey. Welcome, everybody. Tuesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, June 9th, 2015. JD and Stacy here on K98 Talk for Game On. Get over the chat room right now at K98Talk.com. Say hello to the beautiful and brilliant Miss Stacy Lennox. Tonight, we are so pleased to bring you a fantastic interview with Judith Miller of Fox News, discussing her new book, The Story, A Reporter's Journey. How do we even describe that book to the audience?
You know, it's an amazing book, and it is such a good book. I actually bought it for my mother for Mother's Day. It does contain politics and a ton of history, but it's written in such a style that it grabs you and it keeps you. It's an amazing, amazing book.
It really does, and everybody out there, you're going to get a flavor for it after you hear the interview with Judith Miller. But the book it's not just politics, it's not just policy, it's not just media. It is Indiana Jones and Lara Croft and Tom Clancy and bombs blowing up. The woman has been in jail. She's been in an Iraqi prison and a New York prison.
Yeah. Thank God this stay in the Iraqi prison was short.
Oh, man. Then later on in the show, we are going to be discussing the Obama administration no strategy for ISIS. And all of a sudden, the Marco Rubio long knives have come out. But before we go into the rest of the show, Stacy had an amazing interview. I recommend everybody go over to Spreaker.com, K98 Talk, and check it out. She had an interview this past Sunday with Stephanie Scruggs of Coalition for a Strong America. Everybody right now go to coalitionforastrongamerica.com. The interview was specifically cut over TPA, which is Trade Protection Authority. There's a big vote possibly coming up as early as Friday on TPA. You're going to hear a PSA that we cut tonight on the issue. I know, Stacey, you wanted to say a couple of words about it before we started, right?
Yeah, actually some interesting stuff going on in the House. This is a very tight vote, folks. If you are on the fence about it at all, please go to coalitionforastrongamerica.com and read the primer. It is full of good information. There is no conservative case for Trade Promotion Authority. There's even less of a conservative case for the ultimate bill, which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. You really have to take a look at what the Trade Promotion Authority does. It gives Obama free reign. And we're seeing some
Get over to coalitionforastrongamerica.com right now.
Steph-
I guess you're having that audio glitch in your ear?
Yeah.
Everybody get over to coalitionforastrongamerica.com right now. There will also be, I recommend everybody out there, if you have 28 pages in you to read, there is a Congressional Research Service report dated May 28, 2015 that will give you the entire history over the last 150 years of how we've gotten to what they call this TPA Fast Track Authority. Of course, this coming Thursday night, 10 p.m., catch Stacey and I again. No, we're 9 p.m. Thursdays, right?
Yep.
Catch us 9 p.m. here in K98 Talk for another edition of Game On. This coming Sunday, 11 a.m., Bloody Marys and Broadsheets. Stacey and I are going to be bringing you Mary Catherine Ham and Guy Benson talking their new book. And, of course, as always, go to Spreaker.com, K98 Talk, and find out the catalog of our show since we've been over here with that Ricky Ticky, Tavi, Rick Robinson, and that K98 Talk family, baby. Just been all sorts of family love over here, right?
Right.
Okay, so now I think the best way to set up the flavor of the Judith Miller interview in the book, if you want to get a flavor for the book, folks, it goes something like this. Everybody just got excited. Who doesn't like a good Indiana Jones movie? And without further ado, Stacey and I want you to sit back, relax, listen, and please enjoy a fantastic interview with Judith Miller of Fox News, formerly the New York Times, discussing her new book, The Story, A Reporter's Journey. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Stacey and I's absolute pleasure and privilege to bring to you Miss Judith Miller. If you do not know who Judith Miller is, please stop listening to the show right now. Just go away.
You've been living under a rock.
Oh, yeah, just get out from under that rock. She's an investigative reporter formerly with the New York Times. She was part of the team that won a Pulitzer for articles before 9/11 on Osama bin Laden. Ms. Miller is co-author of the #1 New York Times bestsellers, Germs, Biological Weapons in America's Secret War, and Saddam Hussein and the Crisis in the Gulf, and author of God Has 99 Names, reporting from the militant Middle East, and One by One, Facing the Holocaust, which is a story you have got to hear about how that book came about. She is an adjunct fellow at the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research, contributing editor to the City Journal. You can find her everywhere on Fox News. Today we're going to be talking her book, The Story, A Reporter's Journey, for which you will take the shotgun out, shoot the lock off your wallet, and buy it. Why? Because Judith Miller is Lois Lane meets Lara Croft from Tomb Raider, meets Tom Clancy, meets Amelia Earhart. Welcome to the show, Miss Miller.
Hi, what an introduction. Wow.
Well, we've actually decided they could make a video game out of this story, a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, seriously, once into the first couple chapters of the book, I went out and bought it for my mother for Mother's Day.
Oh, thank you. That's such a nice, an adventurous type.
She's actually loving it. So,
good.
You know.
I'm glad.
First, I want to congratulate you on telling a wonderful story in this book because I found it to be both personal and informative. Certainly, my childhood has been dominated by conflict in the Middle East, much the way my parents' childhood was dominated with the Red Scare. And reading this book, I was actually recalling elements of my childhood where Lebanon and Beirut and the hostages in Iran were just in the news all the time. And it used to terrify me as a child. And I find as I've grown up, I'm watching these news stories come out of the Middle East and kind of what's gone on there with the rise of radical Islam. And it terrifies me just as much. We haven't made much progress.
No, we haven't, have we?
No.
Yeah, I wish we'd made more progress, but we haven't.
Yeah.
Because I knew, when I started covering this, and it's part of what I write about, that it was going to be a long conflict, long fight. Well, you know from your background what a really difficult, complex, confounding area this is.
Right. Well, one of the things you wrote about was your time in Cairo, kind of in that bureau for the Times, when all of this really kind of started to implode within the Middle East. You were actually talking about, there's a line in the book, when you were standing outside the suicide tax in Beirut on the embassy and the Marine base, saying it marked the de facto start of a war against America that would continue straight through 9/11 and beyond. And you go into great detail about your activities in the Middle East leading right up through the search for weapons of mass destruction in the Gulf War, which is really where a lot of your notoriety came from in the most recent past. Can you talk to us a little bit about what it was like to function in the Middle East and, especially as a woman and a journalist?
I think functioning as a woman had advantages and disadvantages, but mostly it had advantages because in the kinder, gentler, more chivalrous early days of militant Islam, they tended not to kidnap or kill women. That was good.
How nice of them. How nice of them.
Yes, exactly. Good for me, anyway. Whereas I was constantly worried about my male colleagues. Were they putting themselves in harm's way? Would I get a call saying that a colleague from Beirut or Jordan had been kidnapped? And I was constantly worried about them. Whereas I didn't have that problem. And the other advantage is that, women are still more than half of every society on the planet, and I was able to interview them and hang out with them and get to know them in a way that would have been hard for men. So half of the story that really hadn't been told about what life is like for women in the Middle East, I hope I was able to contribute to telling. And I think some of the most memorable people in my book are actually women, very brave women who fight for things they believe in the Middle East.
Speaking of the Middle East and Iraq, there's some great tie-ins because the book literally opens in Ramadi. But on page 8, there is a paragraph that I really wanted to read to the audience. And I'm only reading you the paragraph, audience, because you have to go buy the book, The Story, A Reporter's Journey by Judith Miller. But this is a little of what you can expect. On another trip to Baghdad in 1985, I had yet another encounter with a bomb. I was having lunch at the home of a British defense official with David Blundy, a British reporter for the London Sunday Times, a brilliant, dashing friend with whom I often collaborated. A sniper killed David 4 years later while he was covering the war in El Salvador. As the diplomat, David and I talked about the war, an Iranian missile struck. By the sound of the explosion and proximity of the white smoke, our host guessed that the missile had landed nearby. Since this could be a rare opportunity to see precisely which missile the Iranians were firing, we hopped in the diplomat's Jeep and raced to the bomb site. So there is about 20 minutes in, a very adventurous, adventurous life.
My first experience in jail.
I was going to say, if I remember correctly, you ended up in jail.
Right. I did, right. In preparation for America later on. Saddam jail, I don't recommend. Yeah, Bundy and I were caught at the site. The diplomat happily was sent away. We sent him away because had he been there, we would have been accused of spying. So he raced off with our film and from the site, and we were taken off to an Iraqi jail. And Blundy had this amazing equanimity. He would lay out his jacket, his camouflage jacket on the ground and just kind of on the cement floor and immediately go to sleep. And I would pace back and forth worrying what was going to happen to us. Fortunately, they didn't find any evidence of pictures or any evidence of spying on us, so they had to let us go. Also, if you remember at that point, the United States was kind of helping Iraq in this war, and it would have been awkward to have abused or manhandled an American journalist. So I wasn't as frightened as I might have been had I been an Iraqi or had I actually had something on me that could have led them to charge me with espionage. So a close squeak.
That leads me to a question, because that one passage that I read was from 1985, and the book opens up in Ramadi in 2010, and then by the by you end up in an American jail cell, which we'll cover at a later point. But when you go through the book and you take your career and the experiences that you've had, and then you've had opportunities where you had an opportunity at some point, I believe, to interview bin Laden, and that didn't come to fruition. With how you function in these environments, how have you, if you could describe the arc of your career through this book, of how you've been able to make choices that, besides going to jail here, have somewhat kept you safe and been able to continue as an investigative reporter in those environments?
Right. Well, I think this is really important to discuss as we think about the growing financial pressures on news organizations. I mean, most of them have closed down their bureaus overseas. They've gotten rid of the foreign bureau managers and the people who were our lifelines. So when young particularly inexperienced journalists go out now to these areas to try and make a name for themselves, I'm always worried about them, because everything that I had as a reporter for the New York Times, a bureau, backup, staff, security, someone to call, people to help me if I made the wrong choice and I got myself into trouble. I couldn't handle a young freelancer today who's trying to establish himself or herself as a journalist doesn't have any of that usually. And it's just so dangerous for them working in Syria and in Yemen and Libya, in these failed states with collapsed borders, where at any moment some group can decide, Islamist or not, that they're more of a message as a prisoner or as somebody who might be beheaded than anything they could write or say. It's so dangerous now. It's so much more dangerous today than it was when I was working, that there are certain areas now today I won't even go to. I simply will not do it. It's not fair to my family. It's not fair to my dog. I'm not going. Sorry?
You're specifically talking about New York City when you say that now, right? Places
New York City and New York City and Sag Harbor, where I live, Long Island, and it's just, I think people underestimate, especially young people who tend to think that, they're eternal. This is an area of instability unlike any we've seen really since the kind of collapse of the Ottoman Empire. And it's so hard to function. And you need to know who the people are who are serving as fixers and translators and the people who say, yeah, we can get you across the border, trust us. Well, my message to them is not so fast. And due diligence and care and thought and double-checking everything. It's so hard, and yet if they don't go, if young Americans don't go, we're dependent totally on foreigners for, as stringers, and that also has a different kind of risk.
Well, with that kind of fast forward, because one of the meatiest topics in your book is, of course, the investigations you did and the resultant controversy around the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq after George W. Bush decided to invade. First of all, congratulations from my perspective, because that was probably the most balanced account I've ever read, full of facts and really good information.
Thank you.
But ultimately, that series of writing left to you departing the Times after spending some time in jail.
Right.
But talk to us a little bit about how that progressed, because I think it's an important story.
Well, I think, for me, and the point I try and make in the book is not that journalists aren't going to make mistakes. We are, right? Everybody's going to make them. The trick to kind of good journalism, I think, is correcting a mistake when you've discovered you've made one, or when you've done your best to do the kind of first draft of history, write it, but then you figure out that there is more to the story than you understood. You keep having to go back, and that's what I wanted to do. I keep wanting to go back and tell the whole story. Once I discovered that there probably weren't weapons of mass destruction, at least not the ones we thought there were, there, I wanted to know what had happened to our intelligence. How did 16 intelligence agencies paid $1 billion a year to get things right, get them so wrong? How did that happen? And I did it by introducing you to some of my own sources, the people I had depended on who had told me about Osama bin Laden and what a threat he was to the United States before 9/11. And I introduced you to the people who gave me tips and helped me in my search to understand how and why the former Soviet Union was violating the Biological Weapons Convention, and they were still in the bioweapons business. And I take you inside some of these facilities where some of the most horrendous agents known to man were made, and show you why scientists did it. And all of these sources they were not high officials spinning a story. They were mostly the kind of policy analysts upon whom, the president was depending to give him an assessment of what Iraq had and doesn't have, and the same, by the way, with Iran and North Korea and all the other countries whose closed programs like this we're trying to understand. And these people had never been wrong, and some of them wanted to go to war, some didn't, but it didn't matter because they were trying to make an assessment of whether or not Saddam was still hiding stuff, and they overwhelmingly concluded that he was, and they'd never been wrong. They didn't have a political axe to grind, and so I believed them. And then when it turned out that they were wrong, I wanted to go back and show how and why they were wrong, but the Times didn't want me to do that. They wanted the story to go away. They wanted to draw a line under it, say, well, that's then, this is now, let's move on. But I don't think you can really move on until you understand what went wrong, which is why I wanted to go back. And when they wouldn't let me kind of continue pursuing this, I think, vital issue of, the intelligence community's failings, I decided pretty much I had to leave after that. And that was after I came out of jail. I had been in jail for 89 days to protect a source. One of those people who had talked to me, this actually happened to be a senior official in the government. But another thing I report in this book is that we wound up, even though my memory kind of failed me, we hadn't talked about what I thought we'd talked about. But I had gone to him to try and understand how the intelligence system had failed, and we had talked about that. And I felt I had to protect him until he concluded otherwise.
And we are speaking with Judith Miller, author of The Story: A Reporter's Journey. I'm glad you actually segued into that, Ms. Miller. The two things. You had mentioned the Ottoman Empire in the last segment, and I want to pick back up on that on the tail end of this, what's going on in Turkey today. But I want to speak a little bit about having the reporting that you did. Anybody out there who hasn't seen it, go back to those interwebs and check out Judy Miller's. It's some of the best straight-line reporting on anything that you would see leading up to the Iraq War. But then when you first started having questioning and pushback against your reporting, you were actually accused of hijacking a weapons hunting unit and being a middleman for Ahmed Chalabi. If you could speak to a little of that and how that led up to the great May 26, 2004 unsigned editorial, The Times in Iraq.
Right. Well, basically, it's kind of a long story. It's too long to tell on the air, but I'll just say this. When it turned out that American weapons hunters, and I was embedded with them, I was the only American reporter with them, didn't find what we all expected to find. The paper got very nervous, and people began to say that, I was this closet neoconservative who had wanted to go to war all the time. In fact, my long experience in Iraq, I've been covering Iraq since 1976, made me think that Saddam was a really, really bad guy and that the world would be better off without him, and I still think that's true. But that wasn't my mission. I wasn't supposed to write about whether I wanted to go to war, and it didn't affect what I was investigating, which was, did we have reason to believe that he was still hiding WMD? And so I was looking at that and that issue, but the paper kind of, once there was no WMD to be found, they kind of wanted the issue to go away. So this ties into what we were talking about before, what happened here. And they wrote a draft of an editor's note, which is kind of a papal bull. It's a grand apology. And they wrote a draft of it that in the beginning blamed reporters and named names, and mine included, because most of these stories, over half of them I wrote with other Times reporters. And, no single reporter does this at the Times. Everything's kind of cooperative these days. And it was then. And I said, you to the editor at the time, Bill Keller, and his executive editor, his assistant, Jill Abramson, I said, you can't run this. This isn't true. What you're telling readers isn't right. And I basically just marshaled a bunch of facts and showed them that what they were about to write was wrong and misleading, and that we'd need to run another letter correcting the letter we wrote. They eventually wrote a kind of mea culpa, which was quickly dismissed as a mini culpa, not enough, too late. But they apologizing for a lack of skepticism. I totally disagreed with that apology. I never lacked skepticism. My colleagues, to the best that I knew, never lacked skepticism. We were just kind of eking out classified information bit by bit in the way that reporters normally do. And I don't think anybody had rushed anything into the paper, so I really felt that editor's note was kind of the beginning of a very bad path for the New York Times, which you see it in other respects. It is a great newspaper, but I don't think it's particularly well led at the moment.
Well, and one of the things you note in this struggle and in the subsequent outcry after there was no WMD found, you became a victim of what we affectionately call the blogosphere.
Yeah, well, right. I didn't even know about it at the time. Certainly when I was in Iraq, there was no internet. There were no telephones. I had a satellite phone. I couldn't read anything. I couldn't read anything that was being written. But there were all these startups, like the Huffington Post was just starting out, and they were eager for clicks, and they would write outrageous things, and they were totally wrong. And the soldiers I was with would deny them, and they wouldn't run corrections because, the false story got them clicks. And that's really kind of frightening, that people know, even when the people you're with and the authorities and everybody else says this never happened, they continue to insist that it did. And I've gotten a lot of that. A lot of people just picked up those stories and regurgitate them, and they don't check. Almost no one ever called me. Of course, I was very difficult to reach during the 4 months that I was in Iraq, but when I came back, I was easy to reach. And you'd be surprised the number of really well-known reporters who never bothered to pick up the phone or send me an email saying, this has been written, is it true? And, that's just a number one rule of journalism. You always try and reach the person you're writing about to see what they might have to say about in response to what you're writing. It's just journalism 101.
Speaking of Journalism 101, in the last 2 minutes that you've been nice enough to give us here on K98 Talk with JD and Stacy, I'm going to give you one name. He's sort of a colleague, and I'd like a little word association to his situation with what's going on. James Rosen.
Yes. Well, he's my colleague at Fox, and I wrote a lot about his situation. He wrote some very good stories from the State Department, which he covers. And James Rosen was basically had the power of the government turned on him. The government launched an investigation of him under the Espionage Act, which Eric Holder, the then Attorney General, said the United States government would never do, but it did in his case, and it got all of his telephone records, his emails, the top 10 people he called, so they were kind of looking at his calls to his parents. I mean, it was just an outrage, because what James Rosen had done was report about the news, basically how North Korea would react to American criticism of its nuclear weapons test. And he was just doing a very honest job with that story. And he had, because the government was furious that there had been a leak, he had the full force and power of the U.S. government turned on him. And fortunately, he found out about it. Fox was able to fight it. News Corporation that Fox belongs to fought it. And we learned a great deal about what the government was doing. And now, because in part of Fox's refusal to let this stand, I think we know that this administration has had a harsher attitude toward leaks and towards journalists than just about any other that I can remember. And they have gone after more leakers and more journalists than any other administration combined. They've, used the powers of government to surveil journalists to find out who's talking to us. I would, if I were they, would be far more concerned about their kind of unstrategic policies, but they're more focused on stopping leaks. And as a result, it took a long time, because President Obama had a lot of goodwill among the media, that I think now reporters basically understand that they have been targeted far more than under any administration as part of leak investigations, and they've woken up to what's going on.
Stacey, how lucky have you and I been for the last 25 minutes to have had the privilege to interview Judith Miller about her new book, The Story, A Reporter's Journey? I'm going to say it right here in the air. This is the best part of my day job.
Wow.
And
wow. I hope it gets better. Happier anyway.
I now have an insane level of jealousy because JD actually got to meet you in person. So
I hope I'm going to meet you, Stacey. I would love that.
I would
admit
love
to
that
too.
everybody in the audience, and Miss Miller can tell you it was kind of a fanboy moment. I'm like, hi, Miss Miller. I have a radio show. Would you be on it with me with my smart co-host?
Well, your questions are just great, and it gave me a chance to talk, and you listen, which distinguishes you from a lot of those people who've interviewed me. So thank you very, very much for this opportunity. I'm glad you liked the story, and I hope others will too.
We really, really hope that you would consider coming back again to talk about just about anything. Sag Harbor, New York City, Iraq, Ramadi, whatever.
Absolutely. From Sag Harbor to Ramadi. That's the opposite ends of the earth.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miller. It's been our pleasure.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
The staff of K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network is proud to announce that our very own Rowdy Rick Robinson has been selected as one of the top conservative talk show hosts in the nation for his program America Off the Rails. Again, congratulations to Rowdy Rick Robinson for a job well done and another reason to stay connected to K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network.
If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan. This is the most transparent administration in history. Not even a smidgen of corruption.
Fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. What difference at this point does it make?
If you got a business, you didn't build that.
The feeling most people get when they hear a Barack Obama speech, I felt this thrill going up my leg. I don't have that too often.
Steady.
It's time to hear the truth about America's biggest challenges. Ricky Robinson, host of America Off the Rails, will tackle the important issues facing America today as he tries to keep America from coming off the track. Get ready to hear the truth every Monday through Friday starting at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Central, here on K98Talk.com and the Spark Radio Network.
Welcome to the face. Welcome to the face of the new democracy.
Red Nation Rising brings you Town Hall Radio.
From a single tweet to 3 million a month, our community is a force to be reckoned with on social media.
So don't miss our show, Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern on K98 Talk.
Our chat room is our co-host, and you ask the question.
Join us and be heard.
So get ready to sound off on Red Nation Rising Radio. No one else is going to do it for you.
There's a wild, wild whisper blowing in the wind, calling out my name like a long lost friend.
This is JD and Stacey with K98 Talk. We're here to talk to you about TPA. You may have called it Fast Track, TPA, or Trade Authority. Whatever it is called, it is a terrible idea and is coming up for a vote as early as June 11th.
Barack Obama is negotiating the Trans-Pacific Partnership under an unprecedented veil of secrecy. Our congressmen who view it are threatened with legal action if they disclose details of the documents to the American public.
Fast Track or Trade Promotion Authority, if passed, will prevent Congress from making amendments, debating the provisions, and allow passage of trade agreements with a simple majority.
There is no conservative case for Fast Track Trade Promotion Authority. Our systems of checks and balances demands that Congress weigh and debate trade agreements, demand that Congress does their job.
For information about Trade Promotion Authority and what it really means, visit coalitionforastrongamerica.com and then call your congressman and demand they vote no on TPA when it comes to the floor of the House. This has been a public service announcement by JD and Stacey of K98 Talk.
K98Talk.com, a leader in Internet radio. So grab your seatbelts and take the ride of your life on K98Talk.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to Game On here with JD and Stacy on K98 Talk. Everybody, right now, get over to K98Talk.com. Get in that chat room. Say hello to Stacy. Throw some bombs. Have some good conversation. Remember, you can find us again this coming Thursday night live, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on K98 Talk for Game On. But before that, folks, Thursday nights, you have to make 2 hours. This is not just one Thursday night, 60-minute, gonna break it apart for JD and Stacy hour. This is a 2-hour extravaganza every Thursday night because K98 Talk could not be happier to welcome Radio Red Nation Rising every Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Ain't that right, baby?
Absolutely. Town hall style radio. Questions in the chat room. They actually get asked to the guest. It's really not about the hosts. It's about the people that are participating. So give it a try.
And for those of you who enjoyed that Judith Miller interview, get the shotgun, shoot the lock off your wallet, get to Amazon, go to a fine book retailer, go steal it from an old lady on a bench who's sleeping waiting for a bus. But get that book and read it.
Well, we have made one confirmed purchase, so that's something.
Oh, that's right. So, okay, now coming to the bottom half of the hour up until 11 o'clock, we are going to end the show. We're going to be talking about, boo-boos, no strategy for ISIS, and we're going to get into some Marco Rubio hit pieces. But, you know, we were talking a lot about Iraq and things blowing up and the New York Times going after Judith Miller. It's very, very important, Stacey, that people in the audience know something very important about us.
Lottie-dottie, we like the party.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, terrific.
You feel nice and loose?
Oh, I feel pretty loose. I'm like, I actually thought terrific was coming after we announced Obama doesn't have a strategy for ISIS.
Oh, listen, okay, terrific can live forever. It's one of those things that never really dies. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we have all seen with the Obama administration, great piece setting up where he's come from last August by Noah Rothman over in commentary. It's called Obama's Contemptible Casual War on ISIS. I actually think the best piece that's been written about this so far has been by Kristen Roberts at National Journal yesterday. It is so ridiculous that Stacey and I have figured out the Obama administration has basically boiled the Middle East and our foreign policy down to explicitly just this. This is what we're left with. This is what the Obama administration is hoping for. Ooh, it's a Motown Tuesday, right? He wants the next president, too.
Well, better, because if you recall when ISIS first reared its ugly head, our dear POTUS called them the JV team. His exact words at the G7 meeting were, they are now nimble, aggressive, and opportunistic.
What do you mean they are now nimble, aggressive, and opportunistic? Last August, okay, we're coming up on almost a year, Obubu and the rest of the hacks in the administration conceded that they didn't have a comprehensive ISIS strategy. Forget one about that would result in a clear victory. So everybody was up in arms, and they got the vapors, and there were old Southern ladies fainting and the whole nine, and people had to bring smelling salts, and how could you not have a strategy? And he goes, we're going to have one, we're working on it. Monday, he reiterates that he literally doesn't have a strategy. Now, there are two problems with this. And again, the Roberts piece, here's a line out of the Roberts piece, but that's not why ISIS is winning. And to be clear, ISIS is winning. They don't care. The Pentagon and defense officials and the listen, you just spent 25 minutes listening to Judith Miller, who could not have taken her job as a reporter and the national security of this country, which she was tasked on reporting on for years, with the utmost seriousness. Why? Because she's an American who this security affects. You juxtapose that with the clowns at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue right now, Stacey, who honestly believe, And for people out there who wonder why this administration would say they don't have a strategy, because they're developing a climate change strategy. That's why.
Well, that's the biggest threat to national security, according to speeches at our military academies. But I mean, think about this, okay? Basically, what I see him doing is leaving this mess in the lap of the next president. There's not going to be any progress. And the other thing I noticed about his comments over the last couple of days, along with Josh Earnest, is they're only talking about Iraq. Like, Iraq is the only place ISIS resides. They've taken half of Syria.
Listen, here's the quote pulled from the G7. This is your president of the United States. Quote, "We don't yet have a complete strategy. Because it requires commitments on the part of the Iraqis as well about how recruitment takes place, how that training takes place. And so the details of that are not yet worked out." Let me ask you a question. He's not saying that the Defense Department, the Pentagon, and intelligence agencies haven't presented him with a plan that would effectively win. What he is saying is that on his little chessboard that he has on his Unicorn Ranch with his little soldiers on it, where he wants absolutely no civilian casualties and complete Iraqi involvement, I have a very serious question for this country. What if the President of the United States is sitting there waiting for the Pentagon to construct a plan for an idea that is not feasible? That is not feasible. Then what? There's a pull quote I wanted to pull from the National Journal piece from Kristen Roberts. I recommend everybody read this piece. It was written yesterday. It's very straight-line reporting. Listen to this. This is a National Journal reporter, not unfriendly to the Obama administration. We think we've seen, and now she's talking about the American people in general here. We think we've seen this movie before, and we didn't like the ending. But we haven't seen this movie before because this one is not about Iraq. And after a decade of training Iraqi troops, a few more months of tutoring will not turn this force into one that can defeat what Obama today called the nimble, aggressive, and opportunistic Islamic State fighters. That goes back to Stacey's point. It's about ISIS, a lethal, strategically smart, and tactically effective adversary whose intentions are not contained by Iraq's borders. The United States under Barack Obama or the next president, which is who he's trying to kick it down the road to, can choose to sit this out, to let Sunni fight Shia, and then let Wahhabi fight Sunni until some resolution is found. The risk associated with this option is that what remains standing could be the slave-holding, woman-raping, Christian and Jew-killing territory known as the Islamic State, which will not pause to relish victory, but instead set sights on Europe and the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Obama doctrine.
Ugh. But I mean, our strategy, we're going to support with airstrikes. Something like 80% of the planes that leave with bombs attached to them come back with the bombs attached to them. We're not even dropping them.
Stace, they were referencing 3,800 airstrikes. They were flying tens of thousands of sorties every 24 hours in the last administration.
And, but when they're saying airstrikes, of all the sorties they've flown, I believe that's the number that have actually dropped something. So they're still doing a fair number of flights, but they're just not doing – they say the intelligence in the ground isn't good enough. They're relying pretty much completely on intelligence from the ground that is not U.S. intelligence at this point because we don't really have any military there except in a training capacity.
Absolutely, and the one thing that we don't have is we have American concern, but we don't have American buy-in. Why? Because what this man and this administration wants to debate is climate change, immigration, income redistribution, racial politics. Here's a line from the Roberts piece. There are certainly other plausible scenarios between these two extremes, but in any case, this screamed out to me more than anything else. But in any case, this is the debate that America should be having. And what do we talk about week in and week out here on this show? How some ass moron is suing these poor people because they wouldn't bake a cake, or someone's daughter made a comment to a news station, or some new outrage and offense, or one cop breaks somebody's arm after 97 people shoot and kill each other in 6 weeks, and that makes news. These are the conversations we're having and debating. We are being turned into Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. I am sick of it. I am disgusted by it. And until people on our side and in general wake the hell up, we are going to roll headlong into another 8 years of this nonsense.
Well, we have a piece of legislation moving through the Senate and House that could impact our sovereignty to such a degree we wouldn't even recognize our constitutional system anymore. We have a mess in the Middle East, and we're worried about some teenagers that hopped a fence to a pool in McKinney and it got a little nasty. We're worried about Caitlyn Jenner's sex transition. I'm sorry, I just don't care. Be whatever you want.
Okay,
Get it off
terrific.
my news screen. You know, but I mean, these are the things that are distracting people 24/7 that people are memeing and making fun of and laughing about and arguing about. You know, I mean, it's just to the point everything's a crisis, and the crisis du jour so distracts us from what is actually important.
And there is an entire distraction industry. Cue Ezra Klein and Vox, okay? Seriously. This complete circus of hack journalism. For any of you out there who do not know what Vox is, Vox was a $15 million website idea that little Ezra Klein, who I believe is, what is he now, 11 years old, Stacey? Formerly of Wonk Blog at the Washington Post, pitched Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos, a billionaire, having founded Amazon, knowing so little something about business. Stacey and I have been in a few business ventures. $15 million for a website? Ezra, you're out of your marbles. Why did Ezra want $15 million for a website? Because he wanted to build this organization called Vox. Vox, and everybody. I think Matty Iglesias is over there. So basically, if you're a progressive hack, you are over at Vox. And what they do
if you're
at
a
Vox,
progressive hack who can make a bar chart.
Exactly. And
their big bar chart of the week is the majority if their spouse transitioned.
We effectively refer to them as Juice Vox because really it is idiocy. Basically what Vox is a publication that was started to explain the news. So what you can find yesterday at 4:30 p.m. on Vox is what President Obama really said about his ISIS strategy. I kid you not. These people make the talking points memo and Media Matters look like the Washington Post and Walter Winchell. They literally had the temerity to publish a piece that has more words in it explaining what Obama meant and that this idiot didn't say that we didn't have a strategy, even though he literally said we didn't have a strategy. They spent, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40% more words than the president actually used explaining what the president has said. Let me give everybody in the audience a pro tip for reading political journalism. This article starts with the phrase, "It's been widely reported." The first sign of writing hackery is, quote, "It's been widely reported." Oh, yeah? By who? By who? Who?
Well, and I can pull up the video.
Tell them about the video.
I'm just saying, I don't need it to be widely reported. I can watch it with my own eyes. Don't Vox-splain it to me. It's not necessary.
Well, the Vox. Here's some Vox. I cannot stand these idiots. Okay, what Obama said is that there's no full strategy yet for these people. Make Marie Harf look competent. What Obama said is that there's no full strategy yet for training and equipping Iraqi soldiers because it requires commitments on the part of Iraqis. That shouldn't come as a surprise, said Vox, since Obama was meeting on the sidelines of a conference with Iraqi Prime Minister. Is this the first man to be president in the media age? Does he not realize the things that he says are picked up and telegraphed and moved all over the damn world in a nanosecond? You're damn straight he is, because the media keeps telling us that he's the smartest man since Cardinal Richelieu to be president.
Oh, yeah, and he picked a bunch of geniuses in his foreign policy and ambassadorships to speak for him who are now getting into Twitter fights over things like Iran and ISIS strategy.
She heads up that she's the spokesperson for the State Department, ambassador.
I know, and she got into a Twitter fight with a New York Times reporter about Iranian uranium stores.
I could live with sorority girl waking up with the lacrosse player's name who I can't remember without my panties are on, Marie Harf. I could deal with her being ambassador to Luxembourg. She could do less damn damage. She got her let me tell you something. This woman completely pretzeled back to front U.S. foreign policy on Twitter in 43 minutes. In 43 minutes, she completely got the entire country's foreign policy wrong, and she's a state.
She became the spokesperson for Iran. It wasn't that she got us wrong.
She became. I think we have some audio of her speaking in Iran.
Oh, durka.
And then we had some audio of the Muellers speaking to her.
Virgin.
There we go. Thanks, Scott.
What about the lacrosse player?
Let me tell you something. After one night with Marie Harf, the lacrosse player was no longer
virgin.
Thanks, Scott.
Right.
Okay, you want to know what? That is the perfect gear shift. That's the perfect gear shift. You want to know why? Let's take that and move into the New York Times hackery.
Oh, my God. The New York Times has made Marco Rubio its new task, and I'm actually taking one of two things away from this, JD, and I kind of want your perspective. Either, number one, they are terrified of him, or number two, they see that Jeb Bush is not going to be the nominee. He's really not. I mean, it's becoming quite apparent. And they're trying to push conservatives towards Rubio because he's the closest thing we've got to the establishment that's electable. I mean, nobody's going to vote for Lindsey Graham.
First question I had when the 17 tickets story came out, for anybody who knows, Marco Rubio's gotten 4 tickets every 4.5 years for the last 17 years, and his wife got 13. So Marco Rubio has 17 tickets. But as soon as I saw that, I said, whose internal polling was leaked to the Times? All right, so let's back up here for half a tick. You have this ridiculous story appearing in the New York Times about Marco Rubio and his wife and their 17 traffic tickets in 20 years. The Times received this information from a Democrat opposition research outfit called American Bridge. How do we know this? Because American Bridge operatives, no reporters or researchers from the New York Times, pulled those records on May 26th of 2015, okay? All right, great. We can have a little fun. They're talking about 17 tickets. Big deal. There is a piece in the New York Times today. It printed out at almost 15 pages. It paints Rubio as a financially careless and mismanaging his finances. The piece goes back to when the man was 28 years old. Let me ask everybody in the audience, and I want your perspective on this too, Stace. How would you like to have the entire country judging you on your financial management skills at the age of 28? They talked about an $80,000 24-foot boat and a $50,000 Audi that he leased. But Obama's sweetheart real estate deal with Tony Resco, who's a convicted felon, crickets. Hundreds of millions of dollars in cash sloshing around the Clinton Foundation to God knows where. And what? Crickets. There's a 15-page piece on how this guy paid back his student loans.
Oh, after the editorial on Sunday where a reporter for the New York Times said, I defaulted on mine, and here are all the whiny reasons why. And we find out that the Clinton Foundation gave $100,000 to the New York Times Neediest Causes charity. Forced her.
Of course. Who's in more dire needs of some pay-for-play cash than the New York Times? But think about this. This goes back to the 20-page expose on Romney, maybe giving somebody a haircut in high school. Our people need to wake up. But again, this goes back to, you want my perspective? I want to know whose polls have Rubio scaring the hell out of the Democratic Party. Because
Hillary's. Internal.
Somebody's in internal polls. And look, Glenn Reynolds has a great piece in USA Today, and I pick up on this, Stacey, with a couple minutes we have left. He actually was speaking about how it was the Washington Free Beacon's Brett Scher who actually reported that the Times most likely got this from an Oppo research, right? I mean, we have to give the Free Beacon some love on this. They've been doing some great
the Free Beacon has been doing awesome because they also broke Stephanopoulos, except when they go ask, like Judith Miller says, you go ask the person who actually did it or was involved. Those people won't talk to the Free Beacon. They give it back to Politico because that's going to be a little easier.
Oh, it's like venue shopping for a jury. It really is venue shopping. But let me tell you, everybody out there who's a fan of new media, this should tell you that done right, it can be very, very, very effective. Because
it's very effective.
Absolutely. They are running like hell from outfits like the Free Beacon and the Daily Caller, and they're running for cover to outfits where all of their old hacks and lackeys. I mean, if you really want to break down the incestuous nature of the media, go take a look at everybody in what the Vox and Politico and all of what you would consider kind of mainstream tier 2 political publications. Everybody at those publications are alumni of the MSM. It's the same people talking to each other at the same cocktail parties, having their checks cashed by different parent companies now. It's all it is.
Well, and I mean, I still have a little thought about the other theory. So you think somebody's internal polling is scaring the heck out of the Dems on Rubio. I was very interested by the theory that a couple other people advanced today, that he is the most establishment of the leading candidates right now.
He is.
So the thing that happens when they do a Rubio hit piece, a bunch of conservatives start calling BS on it. Free Beacon goes after him. And all of a sudden you have this conservative rallying cry around Mark Rubio that might not be there necessarily, because we've been doing a fair amount of jersey wearing on the right through this primary process, were it not for the New York Times attacking him.
Tinfoil hat theory of the week. Bernie Sanders is behind this like Machiavelli.
Oh, my God. While he's eating an ice cream cone.
Thank you, Uncle Bernie. Oh, no, I got to tell you, if we could just get the corporate tax rate to 98%, and then, I mean, Jesus, I just can't. I just can't with Uncle Bernie. Poor Uncle Bernie. I do like him.
Well,
here he is.
No, I actually think we need to move to that. I actually think we need to move to the metric system.
Oh, you know what? I'm not even playing him. As a matter of fact, here was the response at Lincoln. Right after Lincoln Chafee gave his campaign announce, this was the audience's response.
Okay, terrific.
Oh, my good Lord. Well, I hope everybody out there tonight on K98 Talk for the 10 to 11 o'clock hour got your appetite wet, because Stacey and I are going to be back Thursday night, 9 p.m. for some Game On, and that's going to be 1 hour after Radio Red Nation Rising, who the K98 Talk family wants to welcome, who's here 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, Sunday, 11 a.m. Stacey and I are going to be back with that Bloody Marys and broadsheets, baby. You're cure for that mainstream media hangover. We'll be bringing you that Mary Catherine Ham and that Guy Benson, baby. Yeah. And as always, being that we're not on Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, get you over to that Spreaker.com. Go to K98 Talk. Find JD and Stacey's catalog. You can also find us at SoundCloud.com/JD-Stacey. You can find some catalog at Third Rail Ramblers and all that good stuff. Lordy, 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 we started the week off right, did we not?
Absolutely.
All right, lady, you got those keys?
I do. Let's get on up out of here.
Fantastic. Tell the nice people what you're going to be doing the next 24 to 36 hours before we see them again.
I am determined to defeat this DPA thing, and I'm working with a whole bunch of people to make as much noise as possible.
I'm doing the same. Get over to Coalition for a Strong America. Get in touch with that Stephanie Scruggs. Let's kill this bill. And, of course, folks, get yourself over to Alleyways, Barstool, Townsville Repute, City Places I Shouldn't Be, and Just Dead on the Floor. I'll see you Thursday night.
I'm looking for you, you Occupy freaks with your glitter bombs. Bring it on! Bring on the glitter. Everything has changed. Everything has changed in the last few years. Conservatives used to take it, and we're not taking it anymore.